What we're going to do today is we're going to plant 102 trees. These are historic apples, heirloom apples. These are varieties that were grown traditionally in Maine before 1934. I picked that date because that's when the last great freeze was that killed a lot of the trees in Maine. So that's sort of my break-off for what is an heirloom. Some of these trees are fairly well-known old varieties, but a lot of them are so rare that we don't even know what the original name was. Some of them have names that I've been able to determine, and others of them have names that are not very glamorous. Here is the Orland Town Office number 2, which is there's that ancient orchard next to the Orland Town Office. This is Belgrade Greening, which is a totally fictitious name. We don't know what it is, but we know it's in Belgrade and we know it's green. This is Wagner, which we know is correct. That one we do know is correct. Wagner is an old New York apple. So some of these apples originated in Maine, but all of them were grown traditionally here. What we're going to do is we're going to plant 102, and it's 102 because that's how many spaces fit into this part of the gravel pit. Eventually, we're hoping for about 500 trees, maybe 600. We've organized them partly according to season, so we'll have like a row of summer apples or fall apples or whatever. And we've also organized them to what part of the state they came from. Let me get a shovel and we'll plant a tree. Woo-hoo. What I do, I put the soil. For 30 plus years, I had been collecting these old varieties from around the state, trying to preserve them on our farm in Palermo. So the way that I would preserve them was to get them grafted onto one of our trees, and then that way I could take the cuttings from that and make trees from it and make sure that the original tree was not lost. About maybe 6 or 8 years ago, Russell Libby, then the executive director, he and I were talking about this, and he said, you know what, we have this gravel pit that we wound up purchasing. They didn't intend to buy it, but they were buying some farmland here, and it came along with the farmland. He said, what if we turned that gravel pit into a heritage orchard, and it would be 10 acres, and you would have lots and lots of space. So instead of having a little branch of each of these varieties, you would actually be able to have a whole tree. And then you would really be able to see what the tree does, you could learn about the tree, and you could save them as whole trees that would produce fruit and would produce all the cuttings that you'd ever need to begin to reintroduce some of these varieties that merited reintroduction. And at the same time, we could show how do you renovate highly disturbed, depleted, spent land by renovating this gravel pit. About a year and a half ago, we tossed the first shovelful into the gravel pit, and then we reconfigured about 2 acres into this terracing. And then we began the process of bringing in wood chips, which we had generated here on the site.
My name is Tom Vigue, and I'm involved with the Heritage Orchard from a permaculture perspective. My involvement by default kind of is that I'm the guy who deals with fungal things, and eventually in the orchard we will be planting a lot of things besides apples. There's a swale on each terrace, and the swales for retaining water have been filled with wood chips. So as an experiment, we have on 3 of those swales inoculated the wood chips with King Stropharia mushroom, which is an edible mushroom that aggressively attacks woody debris. So it's a twofold use that helps to create soil quickly while also producing an edible mushroom. And so it may be the first harvestable crop in the whole project.
We're planting so many different varieties because the apple is the most diverse of all fruit. We have great dessert fruit. Those are the fresh eating fruit. We've got wonderful apples for pies, for sauce, for butter, for cake, for bread. We've got apples here that ripen in August and September and October, and ones that keep all winter long in the root cellar. We've got varieties here. Many of them are highly disease resistant. These apples connect us with our history. They connect us with place. In a time when people are longing for connection to place in a transient society, these apples do that. And each one has a great story behind it. In a world where we need more diversity, these varieties provide us with that. We had grafted the trees and then we planted them. We fertilized each spot with soil amendments and some compost and so forth, and got the holes all ready. And then last April, so we had a big volunteer day and we planted the trees, and we probably had 50 volunteers, and we planted 100 trees in about 2 hours. We purposefully not mowed it. We just let everything just grow this year. We wanted everything to grow tall. We wanted habitat for the beneficial insects and the pollinators. We wanted to basically reinstill life into this really depleted gravel pit. And we think that we've begun to do it. We're really happy. We've got this tree here. It's got some good growth on it. Now it's towards the end of the season, so it's starting to drop its leaves, but the foliage was nice and green all summer, and the trees seem to be enjoying their new spot. So we're really happy with what we're seeing.
My name's Lauren Cormier, and I'm helping with the planting of the understory of the orchard and picking out companion plants that will help benefit the fruit trees, and will also help build up organic matter in the soil here and attract beneficial insects, attract pollinators, and create a more balanced ecosystem than is here right now. It's hard to see them, but this plant here, this is blue vervain, and it has a very dense root system that again will really help keep the soil in place. We kind of planted like a little basin around it, so when it does rain, the water will seep in and stay level instead of just kind of eroding down the hillside. And all of these different plants will be marked so that we can, people can walk through and look and see what different species of plants are here. Basically, the more diversity you have, it keeps the ecosystem, the orchard ecosystem, in balance. And so potentially there's less insect pressure, because you're bringing in beneficial insects that will feed on the pests of the apple tree. So you're keeping those populations in check. It's also helping build up the soil that would otherwise could be eroded away in this situation. Really just helping rehabilitate the land here. The healthier the ecosystem is that the trees are in, the healthier the trees are going to be.
This process of renovating this gravel pit is going to take years. I mean, we might not really have the whole thing renovated for 10 years. In the spring of 2015, we'll be planting about 80 more varieties, and then in 2016 probably another 80, and then it'll probably taper off to where we're doing maybe 20 or 30 a year after that. So this is our second year of planting, and we will be planting about 75 varieties, mostly apples, some pears. We're hoping for a big crowd today to help us do this. Okay, there is a tag on each stake, and then on each bundle it has the position of the tree.
You have golden pippin. Yay, thank you. Yeah. Nice.
This is actually a product called myco-growth soluble mycorrhizae. Mycorrhizae refers to the relationship between fungi and plant roots. Without this association, most trees don't fare well. And this site, having been denuded and damaged by the activity that was here before, harvesting or mining gravel, is impoverished. And so we're doing this inoculation with the mycorrhizal inoculant that has something like 45 different species. And a number of those species will surely be happy associating with apple tree roots.
So it was a great day today. We had a lot of volunteers, so a lot of people who weren't here last year who were drawn obviously to the Heritage Orchard. People are excited. It's exactly the kind of thing that we imagined when we decided we would do these plantings. Now folks are working on planting small woody plants all over the site down here to stabilize it as part of a restoration of a native wetland area. We've done sort of the easy areas. So now the question is where phase 3 goes. So we have roughly 180 trees in the ground, 400 to go.
Right now, there is this incredible excitement around agriculture in Maine. MOFGA in particular, but there's lots of other organizations that have been involved, have been a focal point and an inspiration for young farmers. One of the biggest issues for them is the access to land, because when I moved to Palermo, the land was $25 an acre. Now, $35,000 might buy you an acre if it's in certain parts of Maine. So what we need to do, too, is to figure out ways of making land accessible to young people. And one way of doing it is to show people that actually you don't need to buy the best farmland in the world. You can in fact take land like this that was just highly abused and infertile, and then you can turn it into highly productive farmland.
I think what you're seeing now with the new Back to the Land movement, it's really interesting because it's like the Back to the Land movement of the 60s or even of the 40s, but it's also different. Back then it was really more about making a break with society. It's like giving up on society in a way and going to this other thing. And now what you're seeing with the young people who are going into farming is that they're doing it to save society. They're trying to be, the people who plant the seeds for a new generation that really makes things better. And that's an interesting difference to me, and I think a really encouraging one.
I think it provides tremendous inspiration for what kinds of positive land management techniques exist out there that can be used to rehabilitate damaged landscapes, to make damaged landscapes ecologically healthy, and not only make them ecologically healthy, but also make them edible and an abundant producer of food as well.
Did everybody get chestnut? Everybody taste it? Okay. You should just raise your hand and pass the plates around. Here's a few more chestnuts if somebody wants a little more. Every year at the fair we have an apple tasting, and we do it with the varieties that are ripe at that time, which is late September. We pass out little pieces of the apples, and then everybody yells out their comments, and then eventually we vote. But really, it's at the hayloft tent where we find democracy at work. So the winner,
Whitney Crab!
we do it all 3 days, and sometimes we have the same winner every day, and sometimes we have totally different winners. But we could do an apple tasting really every week from September to November, because the varieties ripen in a progression all through the fall. Come back again next year, and really remember that MOFGA is MOFGA because of what you do to make it happen. So help make it happen. Thank you all very much.
And that's how an orchard is made.